So, the next volume for My Hero Academia, Volume 39, is about to be released in Japan very soon. And in this video, I am going to be covering the volume extras that is going to be in this volume so that you can be prepared for when it comes out in America. So, let's do this, but first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm here to cover the volume extras for My Hero Academia Volume 39, and there is actually a fair amount we need to talk about when it comes to this volume. Because we get some information that's revealed, obviously, about the Armored All Might suit and what that will entail, as well as some information and some sketches when it comes to Uraraka, as well as some very not well-known characters that we saw during this final arc that Horikoshi decided that he wanted to talk a little bit more about, as well as a heart-wrenching letter that Horikoshi had in the volume extras that I think that you should be aware of at this moment. And to be clear, I will only be covering the volume extras, those in-between pages that are going to be in the volumes, and not necessarily the additions that are made on the actual chapters themselves. That in itself can be its own separate video. So that's enough preamble. Let's just dive right into this video and talk about what's going on with Volume 39 of My Hero Academia. And to start off, let's just talk a little bit about that color page where we get to see Uraraka on one side, Shoto on the other, and All Might with his hands clasped together in the middle as we see the red, the white, and the blue in the background, which many people would attribute to the origins of French because of Aoyama and the major part that he plays in the battle that All Might is having in this volume. But pretty much the reasoning why we have these three characters on the volume cover is that these three characters are playing major roles, not just in the war, but within this volume, starting off with Shoto and his fight against Dabi alongside Endeavor, immediately followed by Uraraka in her fight with Toga, and the volume chapters that in the chapter will be the fight between All for One and All Might. So it makes sense for Horikoshi to have a cover like this, but this cover actually had, once again, some controversies with it. It is mainly the idea that people were expecting that Uraraka would actually have her own solo cover page. And going into that a little bit more, if you didn't know, sometimes when it comes to the covers, that when it comes to the flap, you can unflap it a little bit more. Actually, just give me a minute, let me show you. Here we go. Something like this, where if you can tell, this is an authentic Japanese My Hero Academia volume cover where we actually get to see the cover of Muriel on the front, but you see that there's this little bitty flap that actually covers it where there's actually something underneath it. And this is most likely what this cover and this volume cover is trying to portray, that there's actually something else underneath it, and once again, something else even on the back cover, and that's also something else that we will talk about in this video as well. And yeah, I've done similar videos like this before, but I don't think I've actually shown off the actual volume, what a Japanese volume actually looks like. But getting more on topic, the reason why I bring this up is because we have something that's going to most likely be under the cover, where we have both Shoto as well as like the hand representation of Horikoshi, pretty much explaining how like what they wanted to have Uraraka have her own cover, but that he couldn't really do a whole lot and he was just very indecisive, so he just threw all three major players on the cover itself. And we get that confirmation where we have the hand itself saying, I really wanted to have a solo cover for the volumes with a rising chapter, but things got a bit messy, Koshi. And even if she doesn't specifically have a rising, Ochako is working hard, so I like to give her a solo cover, Koshi, as we have Shoto chiming in that this cover nearly shows the author's indecisiveness. Let's do our best today as well. So it's very cool that the representation of Horikoshi, once again, ends his sentences with Koshi, which apparently he's done before, but also Horikoshi recognizes his own indecisiveness and how he definitely wants to give Uraraka a solo cover. So this is most likely saying that this will happen, if not in this volume, potentially within the future volumes, hopefully. So yeah, people were mad that Uraraka didn't get a solo cover, but eventually Horikoshi is planning on giving her one and hopefully giving her a rising chapter as well. And from there, we get a table of contents where we get to see La Brava being very cutesy, as well as underneath it, we get to see Toga and Uraraka as kids, which is going to be a reference to what we get in the actual volume when it comes to their battle, which is representation of a sort of more or less like symbolic like imagery of them trying to accept one another. But this volume is going to be starting from volume 387, which in the English is titled Counseling, and will be ending at chapter 398, Toshinari Rising/Origin. So yeah, that gives you a little bit of a feel of what's going to be in the volume when it comes to the chapters, and how it's going to be approximately 12 chapters long, more or less 11, with something I'm going to hopefully get into in another video. And going from contents, let's talk a little bit more about some sketches and images that are going to be in the volume extras. One of them is going to be the title page featuring Dobby, which looks amazing, of him laughing with his hands in a clapping like motion, wearing a very snazzy suit. That is also on fire because it's Dobby. As well as we get Horikoshi apparently having a few Toga sketches of Toga and Uraraka, and how he says that before starting the Toga and Uraraka chapters that he drew a lot of sketches like these, and how he was trying to capture the vibe that was going to go with, and through Ochako's hair it was a little bit shorter in these sketches. So the implication is that he had a few sketches that he wanted to do before the actual chapters began, and that these are some examples of them. As well as we have another extra image where we get to see the characters of Dobby, Shoto, Toga, and Ochako in a sort of like uniform, in a school uniform like way. So that's cool that we get that with Horikoshi, as well as most likely there's going to be a Star Wars reference in this volume extras, where we get to also see small chibi versions of Deku, Endeavor, as well as All Might. So I do not know exactly the context of this. It just could be just a very much Horikoshi wanted to draw something cute with the main characters and main villains that they are fighting against in this volume. So that's all I can really say about this at this moment. But from there, let's get more into the meatier extras of this volume. And this is not going to be necessarily in order with how it's going to appear in the volume, so I'm going to be going from what I seem to be the least important aspects to the most important aspects that we're going to be getting in the volume. And nothing says least important as we get a mention of the spies that we saw earlier in the actual series, where we get a page where we get to see Horikoshi explaining where or who these actual spies are and where they come from. And he says that these are the All For One spies, and how they're infiltrating among the UA refugees, and that they appeared in volumes 35 and 37. And at the very least, you probably recognize the woman who was partially responsible for what happened with also a younger individual, which led to the collapse of one of the structures that were sending people from UA to Shiketsu, where we get to see that that was the shuttle where the Todoroki family resided, as well as other characters such as Tetsu, Kendo, as well as Death Arms, who regained his heroic spirit during that moment. So it's cool that Horikoshi is once again clarifying and reiterating that they are still spies, or that there were spies that respected and were under All For One, and he's trying to give the readers a more or less memory of who they are and what they look like. And going from the spies in a very similar vein, we also get to see the three images of the three little kids that were very much prominent in the arc, where we got to see Bakugo, Shoto, Inasa, Kami, where they were trying to gain the ability to be provisional heroes. And Horikoshi explained that these kids are from Masagaki Primary School. They first showed up in volume 18 during the remedial course arc, and how he drew these ones based off the fading memory of a foreign kid that he saw somewhere, but he still can't remember where it was. And this is something that I find very interesting, because if he's depicting these kids as being based off foreigners, this explains a little bit more about how many characters within the world of My Hero Academia do not look traditionally Japanese. Don't get me wrong, there are some characters that are obviously Japanese, but then you have characters like Rocklock, who is obviously of African descent, and he does not explicitly look Japanese, and how most likely this is showing that the world of My Hero Academia is a little bit more merged together, more of a melting pot, where the idea of being Japanese, it's not solely based most likely on like Japanese heritage and looking Japanese, but more of the culture of Japanese. Because these kids do not look traditionally Japanese, and one of them looks more traditionally English or British to a certain extent. So it's cool that Horikoshi took inspiration from outside of Japan to inspire characters within his story. So that's great that we get to see more of that in a story that is primarily for a Japanese audience. And going from there, we actually do get a little bit more additional information from a very unexpected source, which is actually one of the reporters that was recording the battle at Gunga Mountain, and we get a little bit more information about her, which is something that I wasn't expecting. Because we do get an image of her, and let me just clarify that these are the same character, they're just one that is more prim and proper, and one that is more like rugged and what I would call more tomboy-esque. And the additional information that we got is that the reporter lady was able to see the battlefield and that a single girl was able to change the most expensive camera they ever had. See volume 38. Thank you, person who made the most expensive camera. This was supposed to be an additional information page, but the sketch was way bigger than the information itself. It reminds me of those small toys sold with food, which makes the toy way bigger than the food. Now that I think about it, a food hero named Shotgun would be kinda cool. It's a pun on Shokugan, those foods with a toy. And this is something that Horikoshi likes to do. He likes to make references to real world things and makes them into superheroes. But pretty much what he's saying in this moment is that the reporter lady is talking about the camera that, from what we're understanding, is a very expensive camera that may be the explanation for why they're able to get good images of the battle that the world will most likely be seeing, even though they are from a far distance away, and how this image or this camera was used on a single girl, and how the reason why he's saying that it most likely is changing the most expensive camera, that is most likely referencing the idea of how like one character or one action or one hero or one quirk can shape the entire world, and that her and her actions shaping the camera is also in a way shaping the world and making this expensive camera even more important and impactful for what it is recording, which is most likely referring to Toga and Uraraka's battle and pretty much showing the defeat of one of the major villains within this war that could have easily destroyed Japan and potentially have had greater impact on the world itself. So that's just my inference from what this is actually implying, but I could be wrong. Hey, if you think that there's another idea for this, leave your thoughts down below. And also, just a quick tangent, if you like this type of content and you want to see more My Hero Academia content, I would ask you to subscribe to my YouTube channel because I like to do stuff like this on occasion, as well as doing manga reviews as well. And with that, that is more or less the less important aspects of the volume extras. Now we're getting into a little bit more of what's going to be more of the girth of it. And to start off with the girth of it, let's talk a little bit more about All Might, and we get a little bit more information about All Might as well as the suit itself, as well as Hercules. And when it comes to All Might, let's start off with probably the least impactful part, which is the idea that he can't really do a lot of like smack talk, where we get a little bit of a fun fact with a line of dialogue that says, "Desperate to play it cool, huh? How undignified," and that the fun fact about All Might is that he's having a hard time trash talking, with an image of him saying that he has a hard time trash talking. So it's very funny. I like this small little moment, and it really adds to All Might's character, which makes sense with what we've seen so far. But going more into the actual suit itself, we get a little bit more information about it. For instance, it seems as if there is a clarity between the armored All Might and the actual battle items via Hercules. We get to see a small image of the All Might battle suit as well as the car right next to him, which once again is named Hercules, where we get the armored All Might and Hercules. All Might doesn't tend to spend much money on himself, but this time he used almost every penny he had to develop these items. It was an insane amount. He needed it shipped as soon as possible, so he skipped the testing period and went straight to action. A crazy armor and a crazy car. No one can say that they're 100% safe. So yeah, this pretty much gives a little bit more credence to the idea that this suit is very much one of a kind. That All Might, who from what we're getting a little bit more of, is a very wealthy hero, which makes sense as the #1 hero, but that information was never clearly conveyed in the actual manga proper, but more in side series like Vigilantes. But yeah, apparently put all of his wealth that he's accumulated into this suit. So the reasoning why not a whole lot of people could have actually recreated it is just due to the resource intensiveness of creating the suit, to the point where it was had to be shipped to him immediately, so the testing couldn't actually be done. So he's basically fighting with a prototype-based suit that could be very dangerous, and as we see, it is very dangerous to a certain extent, where it's able to reinforce his body and be able to tank large attacks, but it doesn't necessarily protect him internally. And that what it can do is like reinforce him and put his bones back together, but doing so isn't healing him, but just allowing him to fight on. Basically, this suit can only be created because All Might himself designed it and All Might himself funded for it to be created. So this is something that was great, and a little bit more clarity for why this suit actually exists and why it's very much specific to All Might himself and how he was able to actually create it with his own money. And tying into that a little bit more, we get a little bit more details about the actual suit itself and how the cape is made out of multiple scale-like parts and how he paid for the development with his own money. Once again, showing that this was made by him, for him, with his own money. And how we get a sort of prototype design for what it actually looks like, as we see that the mask, which is his antenna, could actually apparently enclose upon his face, which is something that we could have probably predicted. He doesn't necessarily do it because he wanted All For One to see his smile to enrage him. And one last thing that I want to talk about the Armored All Might is that we do have some early drafts for it, where we have the Armored All Might early drafts where apparently he had horns instead of like actual antenna that we see earlier, or we see in the actual manga proper. How we get that the cape was made of steel instead of like the scale like imagery that we get in the actual manga proper. As well as it's all black because he didn't have time to think about the color scheme, which is very interesting, but it still very much matches the idea that this is a prototype. He didn't really have a whole lot of time to actually put in effort into it, so it being all black and basic makes sense for what we learned earlier on within the volume extras, and how the muscles look like buffed All Might and how this is his ideal body shape. So yeah, getting to see the prototypes for it, for how it was sketched, looks very amazing, and we get to see that it went through a fair amount of changes, even to a point where one of them just looks like Batman from The Dark Knight. But overall, all of these designs look really cool, but I'm glad that we were able to get the final design for the Armored All Might that we got in the manga. And that's pretty much everything that I wanted to really talk about within the volume extras when it comes to All Might. But now let's switch over to some more information that we got a little bit more about HORIKOSHI, which is going to be probably the most impactful part of the volume extras. And to start off, we have the My Apology Academia, where it seems like there was a new popularity poll in volume 37. I said this will probably be the final one, and I really thought so at the time. I apologize to everyone who voted thinking that it would be the last poll. I would be glad if you decided to vote in this new one too. I'm counting on your support. I'll use magic that makes every vote go to me. And those two last lines are referring to the sketch where we have Mineta as well as Deku. Most likely the Deku line is the line of like, I'm counting on your support, and that the Mineta line is involving magic to vote for him. So yes, to those who didn't know, in volume 37, I do believe it is stated that he believed that that was going to be the final volume extra, but we as the readers most likely knew that was not going to be the case, because when that volume came out, it was around the time where like HORIKOSHI said that it will be wrapped up at the end of this year, but yeah, it was definitely, well, the end of last year actually, and we're already halfway through this year, and we're already past My Hero Academia's like 9th anniversary. So once we reached that point, we all as the readers knew that we're going to have to get another popularity poll, so HORIKOSHI is apologizing for that. And this is going to be a running theme with this one and the next one that we're going to read, which is HORIKOSHI more or less feeling down for himself and apologizing for things that he really didn't have control over. So let's go into the next one, because this is a long one and is probably the most impactful volume extra that we've actually had in this, most likely, if not from what I've been doing when it comes to the volume extras or just volume extras of all time, because HORIKOSHI in this one letter is putting his heart and soul into it. So here's the letter that I want to talk about, and it starts off as such. As many of you already noticed, most chapters have become shorter. This is due to the speed at which I draw decreasing over the years and my schedule being a total mess. Because of that, I've been talking to the higher ups of the editorial department on a regular basis so that we can decide on the number of pages for each chapter in advance, allowing My Hero Academia to be included in the magazine. I know it's 100% my fault, but I always find myself thinking, if only I could draw a few more pages. I'm really self-centered, ain't I? How awful. So they told me that chapter 395, Built Upon the Joys of Others, would be 13 pages long, but as we can see, it ended up being 15 pages. And that's thanks to Ima Umara-san, my editor. I made a 13-page long first draft, but it was evident that I had to hinder the narrative for it to work. If I were a better author, maybe those 13 pages would have been enough. So I took the first draft and handed it to Imamura-san, who read it and fell silent. After a while, he said, "What if you added 2 more pages?" An editor increasing the page count based on their personal opinion is considered a major taboo. After all, the magazine consists of many series and many chapters. But Ima-san is a relatively younger editor, so maybe that's why. Is this even possible? I asked, and his eyes lost their sparkle. Don't worry, I'm the only one who's going to get scolded. I liked this draft, but I think the chapter has the potential to be even better. So I'm thinking you to draw 2 more pages within the time limit. If the deadline comes and you haven't done it, it'll be a problem for everyone. What do you say, Horikoshi? His eyes were black as a black hole. They were pits without any light. And that's how we managed to publish chapter 395 with 15 pages. What I'm trying to say is that both Ima Uma-san and the editorial department are giving their all to make sure that My Hero Academia comes out in the best possible way. If it weren't for their efforts, maybe it wouldn't be possible for the serialization to continue. So I want to take this opportunity to thank them. Thank you very much. And I want to send a message to everyone who's entering adulthood: meet your deadlines and avoid causing trouble for other people. Otherwise, their eyes will be filled with darkness. Come to think of it, I never managed to finish my summer vacation homework on time. It should have realized that back then I wasn't fit for life in society. Kohei Horikoshi. And this is just sad and tragic, especially from a Western perspective, because it seems as if Horikoshi is putting his all into the series, that he hasn't given up, that this is a series that he wants to write, which kind of goes against the ideas that, oh, he's rushing, oh, that he doesn't care. No, he does care, but just that the ideas and just the working schedule of being a mangaka in Japan has just worn him down to this point where he can't put his complete all into it, because that's not what he can anymore. This is his new normal, and that's kind of sad. And while many people want to hate on this is due to the editorial staff or the Shonen Jump staff, which is partially true, we also have to take into account just society of Japan as a whole that instilled this ideal into Horikoshi, making him blame himself for not meeting deadlines even though he physically can't do it. So for as much flack as we want to give the Shonen Jump editorial staff, we have to address more of this being a societal issue than strictly Shonen Jump. And that while the editorial staff may have what's beneficial for the story in mind, it also comes at a cost to Horikoshi's health. While yes, Horikoshi does recognize that the shorter chapter lengths could affect the story of My Hero Academia in a negative way, and is very thankful for what his editor was able to do to allow for the story to be the best to its ability based off their beliefs, doing so is working Horikoshi to the bone, to the point where he's unable to more or less draw more than 15 pages per chapter. And while they are accommodating to that, it just really shows the society of Japan when it comes to their working culture and how it can be very detrimental to the people inside of it, especially those that we as the readers may care about them. So I don't necessarily want to put the blame on Horikoshi or the editorial staff solely, but we need to recognize that the work culture in Japan is not that great, and that hopefully they're able to change it for the betterment, not necessarily of the companies, but of the people. because the people's health should be more important than profits. But hey, that's just me. And some people may agree with it, some people may not. This is just what I believe. And with that, that's pretty much the end of the volume extras. We do get a page that is showing all of Horikoshi's like assistants, where we get a list of his assistants, which are most likely those who like help with the actual, like most likely inking of the actual volumes and the actual chapters. We have them being represented by certain characters. We also have his editor, Imamura-san. We have some others such as Aitoku, which is the flower girl, which is most likely one of the kids from the primary school that we mentioned earlier in the video. We have Koga, which is like one of the spies, Ikadaya, the can't you see kid, Monori as Death Arms, Mukino as the Masagaki teacher, Ashigaki as Togeki, Awika as Ago Yamato, and you can probably tell who they are because it's based off going from like right to left. The flower girl is there. We also see the Can't You See kid going from right to left. So yeah, a lot of these characters are either characters who are in UA, who are teachers, who are heroes, or who are spies associated with All For One. So they all have their representatives on this page, and let's just say that they're all drawn extremely well. And finally, we're going to be getting to like the covers or the back covers, where one of the back cover spines is going to be Toga on the back, as well as we're going to have La Brava on the spine, which is very interesting because it's La Brava, she's cute. But as well as most likely what we're going to have within the inner cover, which is going to be most likely the cover, the cover that's like right here, as we see like with Midnight being here and Eri being right here. We're going to have the Todoroki family that is going to be just all of the Todorokis from like top to bottom except with Endeavor on the outside, but then on the inside is where we're most likely going to be having Toga, most likely like on this area right here, most likely, as well as like an image that's going to most likely be some type of like description or some type of like name or quote either by Horikoshi himself or someone associated with the manga or the actual production. I cannot say with 100% certainty who that is, but I know it's going to be right here. And how the volume is going to be ending once again with La Brava, who once again looks very cute, saying next volume, good, evil, life and death. Everything gets hit by the storm. Where do your happiness lies? Look forward to it. And yeah, that's pretty much all the volume extras that we're going to be having for volume 39. There was not as much as you would think, but a lot more than you would expect. Primarily when it comes to the reveal of what's happening with the All Might suit and some sketches as well as some rough drafts with that. The little tidbits of information that we got with Horikoshi and like just getting a little bit more of like his life in Shonen Jump and why the series is as short, relatively speaking, as it is now, as well as just some cute images and some clarifications such as the popularity poll, as well as some additional information from some more minor characters. But yeah, that's all I really have to talk about when it comes to the volume extras. I can't wait for this volume to actually come out, as well as talk a little bit more about the additional paneling and changes within the actual chapters themselves in a secondary and later video. But yeah, that's all I really have to say. And if you want to see more content like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to be notified for whenever I upload more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in the next video. Goodbye!